On Zombie Reddit, today's story is...
I was poisoned at a family dinner and my sister's messages revealed her premeditated plan. I need to share what is happening with my family because the situation has become untenable and I need outside opinions. I am a 26-year-old woman, and together with my husband Caleb, 27, we had been trying to have a baby for quite some time. About 2 months ago, we finally received the news we had been longing for. I was pregnant. Our joy was immense, although we also felt nervous. However, what we never imagined was how my family would react to this news. My younger sister Ella, 22, has always been the favorite of our parents, Henry and Doris, both 56. Our relationship has always been complicated. During our childhood, favoritism was not so evident, but as we grew older, it became impossible to ignore the different treatment we received. She always stood out at any family gathering. She was sociable, self-confident, and had a natural charm that captivated everyone. It didn't matter if it was because of her academic achievements, her personality, or her ability to make people laugh, she always ended up being the center of attention. Everything seemed to come easily to her, her grades were perfect, she had lots of friends, and everything seemed to come naturally to her. In contrast, I was always more reserved and quiet. My interests were different to those of most people, and I often found it hard to fit in with groups. Although my achievements were important to me, they never seemed to impress my parents as much as anything Ella did. It's not that they were directly mean to me, but it was impossible not to notice the difference in their level of support. While they celebrated Ella's every little achievement, I felt like I needed to work twice as hard just to get them to notice I existed. This situation created constant tension between us as we grew up. Although we had some good times, there was always this feeling of competition between us. Ella never took me seriously, and I could tell that she considered my introverted personality strange. Over time, I began to distance myself, both out of frustration and to avoid the constant comparisons. It wasn't the best relationship between sisters, but it was what we had. When we found out I was pregnant, I was really excited about sharing the news with my family. Although I knew I wasn't Ella, I hoped they would be happy for us. I thought my parents would be happy, but when I told them the news, their reactions were strange. Although they said the right words, you could tell something was bothering them. Ella, for her part, showed hardly any interest and only made indirect comments like, "Wow, that was quick," or "Well, okay." Her attitude was clearly dismissive, and although it hurt, I tried not to make a big deal of it. I wanted to focus on my joy about the baby. In the following weeks, the tension with Ella increased. Every time I mentioned something about the pregnancy, she responded with sarcastic comments like, "I guess you're going to be one of those people, aren't you? Or that's what happens when you don't wait long enough to get pregnant." It was obvious that she resented the fact that I was the first to have a child, which I can understand to a certain extent, but it seemed like a pretty immature attitude to me. And it wasn't just her attitude that bothered me, but also how my parents ignored her hurtful comments as if they didn't matter. They clearly didn't care that she was hurting me. Last week, my parents invited Caleb and me to a family dinner. It was supposed to be casual and enjoyable, just a chance to catch up and enjoy some time together. Nothing special, but that's when everything went completely off the rails. On arrival, Ella made a big fuss about a special dish she had prepared for dinner. I don't want to sound cruel, but my sister has never been good at cooking. I have tried her dishes before and they have resulted in raw or burnt food, and I have even suffered stomach upset and food poisoning from eating what she prepares. So when she presented her dish with such pride, I was skeptical, although I didn't say anything so as not to hurt her feelings. I thought I could try a little and discreetly back away if I felt sick. When I started to eat what I was served, I immediately noticed a strange taste. It wasn't necessarily bad, but it definitely wasn't normal. It was the kind of taste that made my stomach churn and left an unpleasant aftertaste. I tried to ignore it to avoid creating tension and having my parents and Ella start an argument with me. Caleb noticed that I was hardly eating and asked me if I was feeling all right. I replied that I was fine, that I just felt a little unwell. I thought it might be nerves or pregnancy hormones, but the more I ate, the worse I felt. I really tried to keep my composure, but halfway through the meal I started to feel very dizzy. My stomach was churning and I felt nauseous. It was then that I realized something was very wrong. I discreetly pushed my plate away and tried to get up without drawing attention to myself. But then Ella stared at me and, with a disturbing laugh, said something that left me frozen. "I didn't think you'd really do it. You're lucky you didn't end up with food poisoning or something, but hey, you did it, didn't you?" I was paralyzed. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. 2 months pregnant, I felt terrible and could barely stand up. I tried to convince myself that he was just joking, but this wasn't a joke. It was something cruel and calculated. I had to get out of there immediately. Caleb noticed how pale I was and asked me if I was okay. He helped me get to the car and we quickly drove home. I was terrified. I didn't understand what was happening, but I knew something wasn't right. Caleb took me straight to the hospital because the pain had become intense. Medical tests revealed that I had ingested something in Ella's food that caused an adverse reaction. The doctors treated me immediately. Fortunately, my baby was fine, but they warned me that it could have been very dangerous. If we hadn't seen a doctor in time, the consequences could have been much more serious. Caleb was furious when he understood the seriousness of the situation. As soon as we got home and he made sure I was comfortable and safe, he called my parents. He didn't hold back at all. He told them straight out how angry he was about what had happened and how they had treated me. His voice trembled with rage as he demanded an explanation of how they could find anything funny about something that had put my life and that of our baby at risk. When they tried to play it down, saying it was a harmless joke, he cut them off, making it clear to them that this went far beyond a simple practical joke and that their actions were cruel and irresponsible. He warned them that if they couldn't understand the seriousness of the matter, they would not be welcome around me or our son. Seeing Caleb defending me gave me great comfort. It was clear that he would not allow anyone, not even my family, to put us in danger or treat me so negligently. The next day, I contacted my parents to explain what had happened. Instead of showing concern, they seemed annoyed with me. My mother said something like, "You're fine now, aren't you? You got over it, so what's the problem?" My father also played down the matter, saying I was exaggerating. I couldn't believe their reaction. I tried to explain the seriousness of the situation to them, but they insisted that Ella hadn't meant any harm. They thought I was making too much of it. The situation worsened when Ella didn't even bother to apologize. She just laughed and said I was being overly sensitive. She even had the nerve to say I was ruining their fun by making an issue out of this. My parents still didn't support me, and instead of recognizing the seriousness of the matter, they treated it as if it were something unimportant. I felt completely frustrated and hurt. My parents seemed more interested in defending Ella than in listening to how I felt. I couldn't believe they were justifying her behavior. It was as if they were blind to the seriousness of what had happened. The situation continued to unfold. In the days that followed, I noticed a change in the family atmosphere. Several relatives who were at the dinner began to contact me. Some expressed their concern and asked me how I was feeling after what had happened. Meanwhile, others, including members of the extended family, began to distance themselves from my parents and Ella. They commented on how inappropriate it was to make that kind of joke, especially about a pregnant woman. The more feedback I received, the more evident it became that my parents were the only ones defending Ella and her actions. There is now a real division in our family. My parents are really angry with me for ruining everything and making Ella look bad. They insist that I am just trying to make her look like the villain. But honestly, the more I think about it, the harder it is for me to understand why they don't see the seriousness of this situation. I really don't want to create family conflict, but I can't just ignore what happened and pretend that nothing happened. How am I supposed to act like everything is fine when things could have ended tragically? I could have lost my baby. I feel lost about how to handle the relationship with my parents when they are allowing this behavior. She hasn't even apologized, and I feel like my family is making me the culprit of everything. That's why I need to know if I'm wrong to make an issue out of this or if I should just forget about it and move on like they want me to. Update 1. It has been approximately 2 weeks since that terrible family dinner, and I need to share what has happened since then. A few days ago, my aunt contacted me to see how I was doing. She had found out what had happened from other family members, who were all shocked by Ella's behavior. Among all the relatives, my aunt was one of the few who showed genuine concern for my emotional well-being. She asked me how I was coping with the whole situation. Talking to her was really comforting. She has always been by my side, and it was very encouraging to feel the support of some family members. At the end of our conversation, she suggested that I consider filing a police report against Ella. She mentioned it in such a calm and sincere way that it caught me off guard. I hadn't even considered that possibility. Involving the police seemed like a very serious thing to do. However, the more I thought about it, the more I began to wonder if he might be right. He explained that Ella's actions were not just a prank gone wrong, but potentially dangerous. He reminded me that I have every right to protect myself and my unborn baby, especially if my parents refuse to hold Ella accountable for her actions. In that moment, I understood the true gravity of what had happened and how close I had come to tragedy. Although I wasn't sure if I would file the report, I felt validated to hear that someone else recognized that my concerns were legitimate. After speaking to my aunt, I shared the idea with Caleb. He has been incredibly supportive throughout this whole situation. When I mentioned the possibility of filing a police report, he supported me without hesitation. He assured me that whatever my decision, he would stand by me. He told me that if I felt going to the police was necessary to protect me and our future child, he would fully back me. I felt more confident knowing that I didn't have to passively accept what had happened or allow my family to dismiss my feelings. I could take action. And maybe that was exactly what I needed to do. However, it is a very difficult decision. If I decide to involve the police, it could destroy any possibility of reconciliation with my family. Although I feel deeply disappointed in my parents and Ella, taking that step would be irreversible. I am still overcome with guilt, as if perhaps I am exaggerating as my parents insist. I can't help but wonder if I am being too dramatic or if filing a complaint would be excessive. But I also know that I cannot ignore something so serious, especially since it affected my health and could have endangered my baby's life. My parents are really upset with me, claiming that I am trying to ruin Ella's life and that I am making too much of everything. They have even suggested that I am acting out of spite and seeking revenge because she is the favorite, which is completely far from the truth. This has nothing to do with jealousy or competition. It is about my safety and that of my unborn baby. The more I think about it, the more frustrated I feel. I can't understand how my parents don't see the seriousness of the situation or how they can defend Ella's actions. It seems like they live in a parallel reality where everything she does is justified. On the other hand, Caleb has been in contact with other family members to get their opinions, and many agree with him. Some relatives have even decided to distance themselves from my parents and Ella because they don't want to be associated with people capable of doing something so dangerous. It's comforting to know that others recognize the seriousness of the situation, but it saddens me deeply that my own parents can't see it, and that pain is indescribable. I find myself in a very complicated position. Should I go ahead and file the police report to make everything official, even knowing that my relationship with my parents and my sister could be completely destroyed, or should I just ignore it like they want and pretend it never happened? It's a constant struggle for me. Part of me feels that I need to stand my ground and show that Ella's actions were unacceptable. But then there is this nagging fear about how this could push me even further away from my family. Would filing a police report be too much? Am I overreacting? Or is it a justified step after everything that has happened? Update 2. It has been 2 weeks since that terrible family dinner, and the situation has become even more complicated since my last post. I am really struggling with all of this and need advice on what to do. First, I want to say a huge thank you to everyone who took the time to comment on my original post. Your opinions and advice have really helped me see things more clearly. I have been dealing with guilt and self-doubt, but reading all your perspectives has made me feel more grounded and supported. Knowing that so many of you took this seriously and validated my concerns means the world to me. I have considered all your comments and they have helped me make a decision that I feel is the right one for me and my baby. It is difficult to take such a stand against my family, but I now know that protecting myself and holding Ella accountable is the best thing I can do. I really appreciate each and every one of your comments. Thank you for helping me find some clarity in all of this. At first, the idea of filing a complaint seemed overwhelming. Honestly, I hadn't even considered it until my aunt brought it up, but she pointed out that what Ella did wasn't just a silly joke or a mistake. It could have had very serious consequences. She reminded me that my well-being and the safety of my unborn baby were at stake, and that I shouldn't feel pressured to minimize it just because it was family. However, it is a very difficult decision to make. I know that filing a complaint would mean definitively breaking any remaining ties with my family, and my parents would probably never forgive me. They are already furious, calling me an exaggerator and accusing me of holding a grudge against Ella just because she is their favorite. My parents have tried to distort this whole situation by turning it into a jealousy issue, which is far from the truth. This is not about sibling rivalry or grudges. It's about my safety and that of my baby. Apparently, my parents found out that I was considering taking legal action. Instead of talking to me directly, they contacted Caleb hoping he would talk some sense into me. I guess they thought he would convince me to let it go, but Caleb didn't hold back. He told them directly how upset he was that he had let Ella get away with it. He made it very clear that if they thought he was going to ignore this, they were very much mistaken. I wasn't there during the call, but from what he told me, he was very direct in expressing his deep disappointment at how they minimized something so dangerous. Shortly after that call, I received a text message from Ella. It was the first time she had tried to explain herself since the incident. The message began with her saying that she didn't intend for it to go that far, but as I read on, her tone became darker. In fact, she admitted that she didn't want me to have a baby before her, which I already suspected. She said she felt she had the right to be the first to start a family and that seeing me pregnant was like a slap in the face. Her jealousy over something as natural and personal as pregnancy was truly disturbing. The message went on, and the more I read, the more it seemed like she was actually confessing that she had planned to poison me out of pure malice. She even insinuated that it wasn't just a joke or a prank gone wrong, but that she did it because she couldn't bear the thought of me becoming a mother before her. I felt devastated. I didn't reply to her message, not because I didn't have much to say, but because I realized that replying would only make things worse. The only way to handle the situation was to ignore her. Her first apology seemed more like a weak excuse, and I thought that maybe she would finally understand the gravity of her actions. I held on to the hope that she would reflect on what she had done, but instead, my lack of response only made her angrier. The next day I received another message from her, much darker than the first. Her tone had changed completely. She was no longer even trying to defend her actions. Instead, she moved straight on to blaming me, calling me selfish for getting pregnant before her, claiming that I was stealing her moment and saying that I deserved what happened at dinner. She even made some terrible threats, warning that if I tried to ruin her life by talking to anyone or pressing charges, I would regret it. I was speechless. It was clear that she was desperate to protect herself, even if it meant trying to scare me into silence. That was the moment I knew I couldn't keep this in the family. If Ella was capable of saying such cruel things to her own sister, knowing that she had already put my health at risk, I had to take action. Her words, the way she admitted her jealousy and tried to justify her actions, it was all recorded in writing. I knew I had to save these messages as evidence. After seeing that last message, I made a decision: I need to file a police report. I know it will cause a lot of conflict in my family, and I'm sure my parents will see it as an unforgivable betrayal, but I can't just keep quiet and pretend this didn't happen. It's not just about me, it's about protecting my baby and making sure Ella understands that there are consequences for her actions. This is not something I can ignore, especially after she reaffirmed her actions and threatened me. I am truly heartbroken by everything that has happened. My parents have practically sided with Ella, ignoring the real danger I found myself in, all to maintain a false family peace. It is devastating to see them so oblivious to the seriousness of the situation, choosing to support her instead of being there for me when I need them most. Some family members have already distanced themselves from my parents and Ella, saying that they cannot be around people who support this kind of behavior. It is comforting to know that others recognize how serious this is, but it only makes me feel even more alone when it comes to my own immediate family. In the end, I have to do what is right for me and my child. Even if it means taking this drastic step, I know that by filing this complaint, my relationship with my parents and Ella will probably be irreparably damaged. But I can't just ignore the fact that my own sister endangered my health and the life of my baby out of jealousy. Her text messages, her threats, everything shows a level of malice that I can't ignore. I don't know if this is the right decision, but I feel like it's the only option I have left if I want to protect myself and hold her accountable. I'm really scared about what's coming next. I don't want to hurt my family, but I can't keep acting like everything is fine. And considering the fact that my family tried to hurt the family I'm building, I shouldn't be so worried about hurting their feelings. If standing up for myself means cutting ties with my family, then maybe that's something I just have to accept. Update 3. It's been a few weeks since my last update, and I wanted to share with everyone what has happened since then. Things have become even more complicated, but I have finally made a decision that I feel is the right one for me, Caleb, and our baby. As I mentioned in the previous update, I was planning to file a police report, and I did indeed do so. After I filed the report, the relationship with my parents worsened considerably. When they found out, they were furious. They couldn't believe that I would actually go through with it, but once I showed them the evidence, the text messages, the threats, everything, they couldn't deny the seriousness of Ella's actions. However, instead of acknowledging this, they immediately tried to minimize the situation. They twisted everything, acting as if I was exaggerating or just trying to make trouble. They couldn't understand why I wasn't letting it go, why I was making such a big deal out of it. My father, especially, insisted that it was just a family matter and that I shouldn't let it ruin my relationship with Ella. He kept saying things like families fight and then they make up, treating it as if it were just a minor argument that could be resolved with a simple conversation. But I couldn't understand how they couldn't see that this wasn't just a disagreement. It was a serious threat. I could have lost my baby, I could have died myself. My mother was even more upset. She was frantic, trying to make me feel guilty for not resolving this within the family. She claimed that by going to the police, I was destroying the family and breaking their hearts. It was very painful to listen to her. She seemed more concerned about her own feelings than about what had really happened. There were many tears and recriminations directed at me. She made it clear that she thought I was being childish and that I was destroying our family over a misunderstanding. It was as if she couldn't see that what Ella did was much more than a simple mistake. I didn't listen to their arguments. Of course, things got even more complicated after that. My parents were furious. They called me every name in the book and accused me of destroying the family. They insisted that I was causing unnecessary problems and that I should forget about it. They tried to make me feel guilty, but I knew that this wasn't about them. It was about what was best for me and my baby. My parents, together with Ella, continued to defend her actions and minimize what had happened. They kept insisting that it was just a mistake, but I knew the truth. It was dangerous, intentional, and premeditated. After everything that had happened, I also decided to apply for a restraining order against Ella. I couldn't allow her to come near me or my baby. I was tired of the manipulation, the threats, and the toxic environment she had created. She would be out of my life forever, and this was the step necessary to make sure that happened. The restraining order was granted, and I feel as if a huge weight has been lifted from my shoulders. As for my parents, they have not taken the news well. They are still siding with Ella, refusing to see the gravity of the situation. It's heartbreaking, but there's nothing more I can do. They have made their decision and I have made mine. I have distanced myself from them for now, and I'm not sure what the future holds, but I know I made the right decision. My priority is my safety and that of my child, and I make no apologies for that. In the end, I feel like I did what I needed to do. I took a stand for myself and my baby, and I'm not going to let anyone make me feel like I'm wrong for that. Ella will no longer be a part of my life, and I've done everything I can to make sure she stays away. I am looking to the future and focusing on my health, my baby, and building the family I want without Ella's toxicity or my parents. Thanks again to everyone who has been so understanding. Your advice has really helped me through the hardest part of this process.